Okay, so our topic for today is learning to live with privacy invasive technology, the case of always listening platforms and apps by Stephen Neville. Stephen is a research associate at the Infoscape Lab at Toronto Metropolitan University and a SSHRC-funded PhD candidate in communication and culture at York University in Toronto, Canada. His master's research on privacy and surveillance issues of smart speaker technology was awarded the 29 Beaver Book Prize by the Canadian Communication Association. Working at the intersections of media, sound, and surveillance studies, his research has published in Surveillance and Society, Convergence, the Journal of Sonic Studies, and the Canadian Journal of Communication. All right, thank you so much, Stephen, for coming here and speaking to us today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it over to you.
Great, thanks so much, Lena. Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here and to have the chance to talk to you all today. It's a little later here. I'm in Ontario, so it's a little later in the evening, but it's great to be connected virtually. Just give me one moment here as I adjust my screen. Okay, I assume everyone can see that PowerPoint okay?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, so I just want to start off by kind of beginning with a recognition and a voicing of a land acknowledgement. I know at UBC, where you folks are located on Musqueam traditional territory. I myself, I'm in Guelph, Ontario, but attend school and work at York University and Toronto Metropolitan in Toronto, which is kind of governed by Treaty 3 agreement between the Lakes Treaty, which is signed by the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. But Takaranto is also the traditional territory of the Anishinaabeg people, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. So with gratitude to have the opportunity to live here and present from here today. So this is a topic I think a lot of people are kind of interested in. There's a lot of news media articles written about this sort of thing, but I'm hoping to kind of expand that beyond kind of a cursory concern and dig into some more deeper social issues and political concerns. So firstly, just a note on terminology. Always listening technology, I've kind of just put in as a placeholder here. Other terms people might use would be things like machine listening technology. And it really is a kind of a broad category of technologies or set of technologies. A very, the most common, known example or iteration of this group of technologies is what's thought as speech recognition technology or voice recognition technology. So I'm speaking here of things like virtual assistants like Alexa, Siri, and different apps that kind of use this technology. So some key events in the kind of normalization or ubiquity of this technology, we really think of this kind of beginning to spread in a consumer context in 2011 with the release of Apple Siri. So that's when that virtual assistant was released for mobile iOS, iPads, iPhones, so on and so forth. 2014, though, was another big kind of event with the Amazon Echo. It's kind of the first consumer smart speaker that was released to market. And then as early as the year later, we start getting speech recognition toys being released for kids, like this Hello Barbie doll, which when it was released, there were a lot of privacy concerns being voiced by parents and privacy critics. And, these kinds of concerns are very much ongoing. So since 2011, there really has been a rapid uptake of these devices. It's still kind of an ongoing process, but the last I checked, this study from Juniper Research, which is kind of a market research study, they predicted that as early as next year, there'd be 8.4 billion voice-activated devices in the world. So that's kind of the gamut of things from smartphones, from smart speakers, but also other smart home devices like thermostats, refrigerators, microwaves, anything you imagine, right for the smart home. A lot of it has either a built-in virtual assistant, or it has kind of functionality for some third-party platform. Like you can think of the Sonos devices, which work with Alexa. There are other virtual assistants, like you think of Microsoft's Cortana for your computer, and various wearable technologies that also have this kind of voice-activated functionality. So as I said in the beginning of my presentation, the privacy concerns are very well known around this set of technologies. There's lots of news articles written about this, but really what I want to do today in this talk is kind of contextualize this discussion for you as educators to hopefully expand how you might evaluate this technology as a whole, as it's being integrated into everyday life. And so in doing so, what I'm hoping to do is to kind of contribute to your digital literacy around this set of technologies and these technological problems. And I think these problems are kind of important concerns for educators, which is something I'll kind of dig into a little more specifically at the end of my talk, after I kind of outline this process a little more broadly to begin. So the approach I'm going to kind of summarize for you today that I think is helpful for this kind of discussion is a theoretical framework known as domestication theory. So domestication theory, it takes the process of, like animal domestication as an analogy for understanding and interpreting the process of normalizing and integrating new media technologies into a home environment, right? So we think of domesticating animals, for instance, as kind of a process of reciprocal learning. And what this means is you think of domesticating a dog, for example. The dog needs to learn how to co-inhabit a home environment with a human or a family. And, this involves, like, the dog, for instance, not only learning how to, not mark its territory indoors, right? Learning to use the washroom outside, but it's reciprocal in the sense that the human being also has to kind of learn how to train the dog in this way. And we need to adapt together. So that's this idea of reciprocal learning. Similarly, or in addition to this, rather, the domestication process should be understood as kind of a short and a long-term process, right? So we think of the dog initially coming to the house, but we also think this long-term process of coexisting with this co-species as being like, processes of breeding and these long-term processes. So this relates to media technology on both counts, reciprocal learning and this short and long-term process, because not only do consumers need to learn how to use a technology, but technology developers, they're engaged in a complex process of learning to adapt and better integrate the technology for the consumer's needs. And again, this is a short and long-term process. When a technology first enters the consumer market, it's not set in stone. There's still likely going to be changes to this technology, both in visual aesthetics and functionality and overall design. So this is kind of how this domestication theory begins to describe some of the things we see when technology is entering households and other social contexts. So how do consumers learn about new technology? Well, we do so in a lot of ways, but I think it's helpful to drill down with an example again. Looking at domestication literature broadly, this was a very predominant framework for studying media technology in the 1990s up to the kind of early 2000s. And then it kind of fell by the wayside briefly, and it's only until quite recently in the past couple years that domestication theories kind of being reasserted as a very compelling framework. And so kind of the reason I think that domestication theory was so widely used in the 90s and early 2000s is because there was a very significant technology being domesticated, namely like a personal computer and the internet, right? So this was a very, it wasn't a popularized computer, wasn't in everyone's household prior to this time. Sorry, it wasn't a very popular technology prior to this time. And because of that, there was an intensive process of learning that had to happen for consumers. So as you'd unbox a computer at home, there'd be lots of manuals to read. There might be books to read. And even still, the learning curve to kind of properly use a computer and use the internet, it was a very steep learning curve, right? So this kind of leads to kind of a second component in the learning process, this idea of warm experts. So this is a concept from Maria Bakarjeva. Warm experts are folks that would have been technology professionals. So likely they could be IT people, they could be computer engineers, people who have like real experience in the technology industry. And these people in the domestication of the home computer and the internet, there are studies that show these kinds of people would often come into people's homes if they were their family member or a friend, and they'd help teach people how to use this technology and how to set it up, how to troubleshoot issues. So they kind of mediated between this kind of professional technology industry and the home market. So they were very key in teaching individual consumers how to learn about new tech. And of course, number three, schools. This was huge. When I was growing up, computer labs were kind of new in public school system, learning typing skills and different software. And of course, individual exploration is a big factor in how consumers learn about new tech. So in keeping with this idea of the reciprocal learning process, how does technology, learn about consumers? And in this case, I'm really speaking about, how do technology developers learn about consumers? And it's quite essential that these developers engage in the learning process for themselves to ensure that the technology can be successfully domesticated. Because if they don't respond to the needs and the issues that the consumers have, it's very likely that the uptake of this consumer technology won't be as smooth or won't be as rapid, or it might be unsuccessful. So technology developers learn a great deal about consumers. One way is through market research. This would be conducting focus groups, doing interviews with consumers, bringing in some kind of sample of people and asking them questions. How do you use tech? What are the issues you have with this particular device or platform? What are the kinds of things you might want to see this technology expand in regard to? These kinds of questions you might ask in kind of traditional market research about new tech. But there's other ways, especially when we get into computational media, that tech learns about consumers, so to speak. And this would be through like data and analysis. So, for example, when an application crashes on your computer, often there's that troubleshooting report prompt. Do you want to send this crash analysis to the manufacturer, to the developer, so that we can better troubleshoot this issue for other consumers? So these are kind of typical ways of learning about consumers and their technology habits and issues. So how has domestication changed today? I think what I'm hinting at right here is unboxing videos. Okay, with this image, this is a key feature in my mind in that kind of concretizes how this process has changed. I think one of the key elements is that developers have really they've strived to make the process as simplified and as user-friendly as possible. So it's not nearly as difficult as it may have been with some technologies like the home computer was to initially domesticate in the 90s. You think of unboxing an iPhone, although we're not domesticating, the telephone at this point, the new smartphone iterations, there's always new features. But in general, the process of unboxing this and beginning that process of domestication is very simplified and aestheticized. Typically, you can just plug in the device, maybe not even plug it in, and you can boot up the product, and you're guided through this very beautiful, simple, user-friendly process, right? It's meant to be as easy as possible. But this is not always the case, of course. There are new technologies that are being domesticated that still don't have that kind of streamlined process. An example of that would be cryptocurrency, their blockchain tech, which there still is kind of a big learning curve or even barrier for a lot of people. And that's kind of, I think, been an important factor in kind of the ongoing domestication of that technology. Another change, though, that's quite key with the domestication today is that in general, it's a highly mediated learning process. So an example of that is kind of the watching of these unboxing videos. So whereas typically in the past, a household, a user, or a family would have been quite reliant on these traditional warm experts, right? Someone coming into your home. That's a real interpersonal contact who's coming into your home and helping you set things up. This has now kind of been mediated with online media. For instance, instead of having this warm expert come into our house, we're more likely to go on YouTube and watch an unboxing video and consume a video where we're going to see someone interacting with a new product for the first time. These are videos where they'll guide you through the setup process. They might provide some kind of informal product review, help answer some preliminary questions like, should I buy an iPhone or should I buy an Android phone? Should I buy an Amazon Echo speaker? Should I buy an Amazon HomePod? These kinds of questions are commonly answered in this kind of unboxing video. Or maybe you'll go on Reddit and have these online warm experts, as I refer to them, help you in the domestication process. So this is kind of the mediation of domestication. So that mediation is a very significant change to how we learn about technology, and it's a very key development in the underlying process. But additionally, there's changes to how technology or technology developers are learning about consumers and learning about consumers' technology habits. So one way, of course, that I'm sure we're all familiar with is kind of the intensification of datafication and different surveillance issues. So new technology is typically cloud-based, and there's a constant exchange of data that happens for various things, whether it's for product and service improvements and changes, or if it's for doing some kind of market analysis and developing consumer profiles, or perhaps it's a data relationship where this data isn't just being used by the original company, but is being sold off to third parties, data brokers. So this is kind of the data industry that technology is engaged with, and this can be understood as kind of a learning process about individual users, about their technology habits, and about how perhaps in some cases to improve the technology and to further propel the domestication of that technology, right? So the adaptation of the technology to the consumer market. I think another key change that's interrelated with that is the adaptation of technology to consumers has become a lot more experimental. And what I mean by this is that developers are constantly trialing new features and functions and even products to kind of just test to see if this will be popular, if it'll be appreciated by consumers, or if it'll be something that is unsuccessful and they kind of give up on. So a good example of that maybe some of you remember would be like the Facebook poke function that was around maybe about like 5 years ago, where you could just kind of nudge someone and say, hey, and there was nothing really to it other than that. It stuck around for a bit, and then Facebook gave up on it and said, this is not a popular feature. But you can see these kinds of little experiments happening all the time on platforms and apps. You might notice subtle changes in interface design, or there might be significant changes, like Instagram kind of adapting Reels, kind of borrowing from TikTok. So there's a bit of an experiment that happens, and they realize, okay, wow, this is popular. We're going to keep rolling with this. So there's always this adaptation that's happening. And this kind of leads to this third point of behavioral modification. So this is interrelated, right, with the experiments and the datafication. There's always nudges happening for consumers to kind of adapt to these technological changes. So this is really how we start seeing domestication theory being a quite compelling framework to understand media technology and these kinds of changes on a social level, because there's this reciprocal dynamic that's happening where consumers and technology developers are adapting together through the kind of integration of a new product or a changing product in a home environment, but also in other social contexts, right? So domestication shouldn't just be limited to homes and households. It should be thought kind of on an abstract level as well, where we're kind of just learning to live with technology on a broad social scale. So what I really want to kind of emphasize here is that the broadly learned social habits of domestication are inseparable from a discussion of privacy concerns, of technology in general. But I'm going to now move towards focusing on how these privacy concerns kind of relate to the domestication process of always listening technology. So my underlying argument here is that we need to reevaluate how we learn to live with new technology to understand how privacy norms and other social values are being disrupted and reshaped. So right now, just kind of give you a brief overview of what this domestication process of always listening technology looks like. Again, in 2011, we have kind of the normalization of mobile voice assistants with Siri coming out. Then 2014, we have smart speakers like the Amazon Echo. Since then, more smart home devices, tons of Internet of Things, platforms, devices, and apps. And through this, there's been a radical reshaping of social norms at home, but also in general. And this is, in this case, specifically around issues of privacy, right? So historically, the home has been a very protected space where there's been this kind of imagined barrier between the outside world and kind of the domestic sphere, where the home was thought to be kind of this privileged space of communication. And that was kind of regarded as being quite central to the development of, questions of freedom and having a safe space to have child rearing activities or to have other domestic activities. And these values are very much still, they're not dead values. Privacy is not dead, as some people will say. These are negotiating values that a technology like smart speakers is kind of engaging with in interaction with. So to kind of situate this discussion further in a domestication context, these next couple slides are going to just summarize a couple studies that I've done on smart speakers in a domestication framework. So the first study, here's a screenshot of the publication. What I did here is I did a content analysis of unboxing videos of the Amazon Echo. So treating the Amazon Echo as a case study for smart speakers. And for those of you who aren't too familiar with this term, unboxing is a genre that's very popular on YouTube and other platforms, where an influencer or just an ordinary consumer takes a new product, not necessarily a technology, but often a technological device, and they just show you on camera the unboxing of that product, and they typically will set it up for you and kind of share their initial reactions to that unboxing process, right? But unboxing has become kind of metaphorically used as well, just to describe a kind of a informal consumer review of a new product, right? And as I said earlier, this is kind of a key genre in the mediated domestication process today, because it's a space and it's a genre of video where a lot of consumers now turn to learn about new tech. So in my study, what I found quite conclusively is that unboxing discourse in this case study is completely detached from any critical discussion of privacy concerns. Okay, so when YouTubers do their unboxing, as we all know, the news discussion of the privacy concerns of smart speakers are very well known, but in an unboxing video, these things never get discussed. And occasionally, unboxing videos, there'll be an audience member where they'll ask a question about this sort of thing. And in my study, I looked at these comments, and typically there's not a lot of those comments, but when they do get raised, those aren't the kinds of questions that YouTubers like to answer, or they'll kind of laugh about them and kind of disparage the audience member about it. The kind of questions they do like to answer are things like, how does the Amazon Echo smart speaker work with its voice recognition functionality? Like how effective is it? How good of a product is it? Or how does this device compare with the Google device? These are the kinds of questions that tend to get engaged with by the YouTuber. These are the kinds of issues that are being engaged with in the learning process in this space. So another key thing related, though, of course, is in these unboxing videos, there's no reference made to the end user agreements. So end user agreements, I'm referring here to things like terms of service, privacy policies, right? And this might not be very surprising. There's been a lot of research about this. It's well known that consumers don't spend the time to read privacy policies. I don't myself in my typical consumer habits, and I'm very engaged with these issues, but I tend to, so I sympathize with this issue. It's a real problem. And these privacy policies are, they're designed to not be read, and I'll get into that further. There's a lot that can be learned by reading them. So I do in my academic work, but again, there's a reason why consumer habits are not kind of geared towards this reading of end user agreements. But the reason why this point is important in the context of unboxing videos is because when you think about the conventions of an unboxing video for technology, the setup process for any new device, there's a moment in the video where the YouTuber, the screen pops up, right, where it says, it prompts you to read the privacy policy and to read the end user agreement to finish the setup process or to just begin the process. And in every case in my study, it just gets skipped, right? And sometimes the YouTuber even will make comments saying, "Oh, no one reads this," of course. So there's this promotion of this attitude that happens through unboxing videos. So one way of kind of stating this is, that online warm experts are functioning as kind of promotional figures, helping to influence the kind of norms of surveillance capitalism, right? So just kind of blindly accepting the conditions of some privacy risks. So basically, what this means is that on the unboxing discursive space, there's a big gap here because there's a complete lack of critical commentary on new tech. And this is, again, is a very influential mechanism in the domestication process. It's not the only space, but it is a very popular space for learning about new tech for the lay public. So this might this kind of leads to the next slide and set of interventions. How would someone learn about these privacy risks? So one way of doing that would be to actually read the end user agreements. So here, I've taken a screenshot of the most recent Alexa terms of use. So this would be a privacy policy that governs the Amazon Echo smart speaker and any app or platform that is integrated with the Alexa ecosystem. So firstly, I just want to draw attention. I've underlined here, the date, last updated, December 14th, 2021. This is for the Amazon.com or Amazon.ca policies. It's different in each jurisdiction. So this is quite key. This is relevant because these policies, these documents, they're always changing, right? And what's interesting about the Amazon website and their products is that they don't provide a catalog of the old end user agreements. So they'll tell you when it was last updated, but they don't give you a chance to kind of look at the older versions of this. So basically, that's an issue because we need to understand how these documents are changing to see how privacy risks and other social concerns are developing throughout the domestication process, right? We want to see how the technology is adapting, and we want to see how that adaptation is kind of interacting with new privacy issues. So another thing that I underlined here in this screenshot, there's two other documents here, the Amazon.ca privacy notice and the Amazon.ca conditions of use. So these are referenced right away in the Alexa terms of use. So I'll get into that a little bit more later, but I just want to stress that there's an intertextuality that's happening here, right? So there's not just one document that the consumer needs to read. You need to jump around between different documents to really understand the big picture of how my data is going to be used and how the technology is operating with that data. And this is quite ridiculous when you think about it, because most of us, especially with a smart speaker, we might not be even using our phone. So there's not even a screen to read these on. Or if I'm using the Alexa app on my phone, I think we all know it's very difficult navigating between different browser tabs on a phone and jumping between documents. This is not something that's designed for kind of long form reading. So it's not conditioned to be read. This is designed to be opaque, and so don't give yourself too much of a hard time if you've never jumped between these kinds of documents. So in a study I did here, basically what I wanted to understand is how these privacy documents, these end user agreements, were changing over time for the Amazon Echo and Alexa ecosystem. So what I did is I looked at the changes to these documents from 2011 to 2018. That was when the study had ended. As you can see, there have been some developments since then, but the kind of underlying findings still very much remain relevant. So because Amazon doesn't provide you with a catalog of these old end user agreements, for my method, I had to use this website, the Internet Archive Wayback Machine. So what this is it's kind of an open access tool where you can plug in a website, a URL, and it will give you a cataloged collection of old versions of that website. So by using this, I could look at old end user agreements and by basically collecting these documents from 2011 to 2018 after the fact, I was then able to kind of compare them and just see the changes to these documents. So of course, just to reiterate, these documents are designed to be opaque, or they're not meant to be read. And not only do you have to jump between different documents, they're written in legalese. So unless you're a lawyer, they leave you with a lot of questions and not a lot of answers. But some answers did come out from this research. When I initially approached this, I was concerned more with the privacy and surveillance risks of kind of the user's speech. I was thinking about, what data is being collected when I have basic voice queries, like, what's the weather, play some music. These are kind of basic functions of the device. So very much focused on, language data and these kinds of things. But by reading these documents, I realized that it's actually not really the only approach, or the most important consideration. I started moving towards thinking of these things more as kind of environmental privacy concern. So what I mean by that is that when an individual user puts a smart speaker in their home, it's not just that person's privacy that is kind of up for grabs by Amazon and by third parties. We need to think that this technology, because it's an acoustic technology, it's scraping data from the entire acoustic environment. So anyone who comes into that space, their data can be collected. So when I bring in a smart speaker into my house, this is also going to implicate someone like my roommate, other co-dwellers, like children, or even people who come into your home, like you're a visitor, or maybe it's like a service worker. Maybe you have a maid come into your house. These kinds of things, and this raises a whole different set of questions, because it's very likely those folks haven't given their consent, and that raises a whole set of kind of power dynamics and political questions that we can discuss further at length later on if you are inclined. So another thing that I found from my study, quite specifically through the end user agreements, was again shifting away from this issue of language data and speech towards what's kind of known as biometric data. So in the development of these end user agreements, Amazon introduced what they call voice prints or voice profiles. And what this is they started collecting data in order to allow Alexa to kind of identify individual speakers based on the unique sound of their voice, right? So we all have this on an interpersonal level. We can recognize a human being based on their familiarity of their voice, which is quite distinctive. The technology kind of operationalizes that affordance, and Alexa might be able to say, "Oh, this is Stephen speaking. This is his partner speaking. This is his child speaking." And one thing that happened in the development of these documents is initially this feature was kind of unrolled in the United States as kind of an opt-in feature. So I could manually enroll my voice, provide samples of my voice, and then that functionality, that kind of personalized voice print, would then be integrated into my smart speaker. But this changed in 2018 in the United States. So this hasn't happened in Canada yet, but in the United States, they changed that opt-in process to an opt-out process. So what that means is basically now your data would kind of automatically be entered into this biometric scheme where you'd have to learn about the change to the privacy policy and then opt out if you didn't want your biometric data being collected. And that's of course very problematic because again, people aren't reading about these they're not reading these documents, and Amazon's pretty inconsistent in providing you kind of with summarized changes to these documents. So it introduces a massive privacy concern without really letting consumers take issue with it. But even still, even with doing all this kind of study, I'm still left with a lot of questions. I don't have a lot of answers, even with this kind of methodology. So I want to just shift now to a focus away from strictly privacy concerns towards issues of surveillance. And one key way of differentiating that is through ideas of discrimination. So surveillance studies thinks about how monitoring and data collection processes, how they're used to categorize people, to do social sorting, and to identify people within those categories for various things. This might be to sell them a product, or it might be to subject them to heightened scrutiny. It might be to subject them to traditional forms of state surveillance. Like there are cases of smart speaker data being used in police investigations after a warrant's been issued. So surveillance really shifts away from just thinking about individual privacy issues to broader social concerns of discrimination. So a concept I've introduced in my work is this idea of eaves mining, and this is meant to kind of expand discussion of smart speaker and always listening tech into a more of a surveillance discussion. So eaves mining, it's a combination of the words eavesdropping and data mining, quite straightforward. It's just to get us away from thinking about always listening technology solely as a kind of a sonic process, like someone's ear against the wall or a wiretap, but to think about how those sonic processes are entangled with kind of back-end data collection and data analysis processes, so data mining. So we need to think of listening and data mining as kind of folded together when we're talking about these kinds of technologies. And just to kind of now illustrate how eaves mining and always listening technology introduce discrimination into different contexts, I'll just kind of enumerate a few things of how this happens and how this I think should be of concern. So again, a lot of this is kind of just showing you an array of applications for this technology. There's some speculation to what I'm enumerating, but I think this speculation is very key because, as I said from the work I've done before, I'm still left with a lot of questions. I think we all should be left with a lot of questions. And this questioning should be held on to as we're domesticating new technology. And I think, questioning is key with, all learning processes, but especially when there's such a serious surveillance issue or set of privacy concerns. So this image here is taken from an Amazon patent. So this is not something that they're necessarily using the technology for right now. This is kind of a potential application that Amazon is thinking about. So the image shows, a user coming in and coughing and sniffling, and the Amazon Echo hears that. And they then, the device then provides a response saying, would you like me to order you some cough drops or cough syrup? So it seems quite innocuous at this point, oh, that could be neat. But as we read into this patent, the language is quite telling in this idea of discrimination. The quote I've pulled here on the bottom is, this kind of function would determine that the user has an abnormal physical or emotional condition. I have emphasized this word abnormality because it's quite key. Normal, abnormal. This is a discriminatory judgment, and you can easily see how something like health monitoring by a smart speaker could open up a whole can of worms, right? It's not just, I have contracted the common cold. What about when somebody has a chronic health condition, a respiratory condition, for example, or some acute medical episode that can be detected sonically, right? So this is a very major concern in my mind. But there are a whole other set of discriminatory pathways that this eaves mining assemblage could take. So I'll just enumerate a few just to kind of expand this. So of course, language, but also so things like vocabulary. Vocabulary can be kind of correlated with things like class, education, these sorts of things. One can certainly discriminate based on that sort of thing. But also semantic sentiment of speech. Does a user use more positive or negative connotative language? Gender. This is a big one. There's a lot of assumptions about gender being correlated with a particular vocal frequency. A man's voice being, of course, higher. A woman's voice. A man's voice lower. A woman's voice higher. Children as well being in that spectrum. And there's a gamut, right, of new applications that kind of use that social construct of sound to help folks in the transgender community, for example. There's a need for some folks who want to kind of better perform a certain vocal identity, and there's apps designed to help them train their voice, for instance, to speak with a different cadence, to speak higher, to speak lower. So this is a technology that some trans users are subscribing to, but if this were applied against their wishes or without their consent, it could raise some major concerns. Questions of sexuality as well. There's a lot of assumptions that one can hear the sound of a person's sexuality, and this is a performative question, but if this were kind of baked into an eaves mining technology like a smart speaker or voice assistant, this could be, again, a mechanism of social sorting. Variables of race, accent, and dialect, these are all things that can be sonically tuned into. This kind of relates to a theoretical framework known as the sonic color line by Jennifer Stover Ackerman. So this kind of social construct that assumes there is a dividing line in how people sound that kind of coincides with divisions of race, right? Disability. So this is key. There's a lot of promise, I think, with this technology to kind of assist folks with a range of disabilities, whether this is, because someone might have a vision impairment or they're blind. A lot of this always listening technology isn't screen-based, so it expands some technological interaction for that set of communities. Also, different mobility impairments could be serviced by this kind of technology. But that, again, kind of could raise some discriminatory issues. There could be just insights about a person and about their physical able-bodiedness based on how they're interacting with the technology. Like, for instance, perhaps a user is using a smart speaker for full smart home automation, and this might be kind of correlated with assumptions about their able-bodiedness. Different variables like affect, psychological variables. We can see this in the case of aggression detection, which is a kind of increasingly used eaves mining technology. It's basically microphones and other sensors that are kind of purported to detect when an argument is about to break out or is breaking out, to hopefully kind of preempt violence. So this has been used in hospitals, it's been used in schools, and it could certainly be used in home environments too, for instance, to kind of preempt domestic violence. So you can see how this could easily be aligned with kind of policing interventions. And it could be certainly used to have kind of expanded safety measures, but there's also, again, some privacy and surveillance risks there. Biometrics, I've already gone into that. Physical health. And this last question of auditory scene analysis. So this is another kind of intervention of eaves mining technology. Auditory scene analysis is moving away from just analyzing the human voice and thinking about this kind of environmental embeddedness of a technology. So for instance, the technology listening for glass breaking in a house, that's a current application for smart speakers. That's useful because it could be kind of correlated with, oh, someone's breaking into my home. But other things like a dog barking in the background of an auditory scene, or a baby crying, or parents fighting, these are kinds of things that could be monitored by this technology, and it could be kind of used to kind of identify, perhaps it's a noisy house, or it's a domestically troubled house. Maybe this could be used to social sort for marketing purposes, or maybe it could be used for policing interventions or social welfare interventions, right? So I just want to kind of conclude now with an outline of some work that I've only just started. This is not research that I've completed or studied in a systematic way, but it's a set of concerns that I'm quite interested in. And for any of you who are interested in this in more of an educational context, this is kind of a very, I think, an interesting pathway for research. There'll be a lot of opportunity to kind of conduct case studies and to look into this further if you are interested in this. So right now, there's an explosion of this technology for various educational applications and for children and youth in particular. So there's a bunch of platforms, for instance, that are meant to help foreign language learners, especially to learn English. So platforms that would do voice recognition to help improve children's pronunciation of words. There's various literacy training applications. So again, using speech recognition to kind of enhance different reading platforms. So this one, for example, this image is Norby's World, which is kind of this a gamified speech recognition app where a child would play a game and then they get a prompt to kind of read text that appears on the screen. And they need to pronounce the word successfully to kind of continue and progress to the next level. So it's meant to be very fun. And this is meant to kind of really support at-home learning. So, you see the image here of the child on their tablet. This would be, of interest, I think, for a lot of parents who, might not have the time to sit and read with their kid, but they still want to kind of encourage that at-home learning. This other image here, this is a beta platform by Google called Read Along. It's similar. It's less for foreign language learning from what I've initially glanced. But basically, it's meant to kind of improve the literacy of a child. So you give microphone access, and your child then starts this profile where they will read through books, and you read along with what's blue. As you read it correctly, it changes to green. And if you mispronounce things, it turns red. And then the avatar here, this little girl, would then recite to you the proper pronunciation, encourage you to kind of read it back to them properly this time, and then you can kind of progress through different reading levels and progress that way. And there are other examples. There's a developer called Soapbox Learning, which is quite interesting. They have a set of toys and platforms and products. And what's interesting here is we see some applications of ease mining tech being used for in-classroom learning. So I think what's key to emphasize is, the application of this technology for learning and for children, it is responding to a real social need, classroom sizes being too large or teachers being overworked, and things like literacy development and language learning. They're very individuated pathways, right? So it's often quite impossible or challenging for teachers to kind of provide that kind of individualized support. So this technology is very much kind of being promoted as dissolving these barriers for children, kind of democratizing learning, and in a way also kind of resolving the digital divide issues, because the voice is kind of always interpreted in these promotional contexts as being kind of this effortless way of interacting with technology. It's kind of a natural way of communicating. So these are the kind of promises that this technology is making. But there are a lot of privacy concerns around this sort of thing. Let me just quickly glance. Right. So right now, some of the privacy concerns that I have with this, they're really intensified, I think, for children and youth than they are for the general public. The reason being is because of the potential for this data to follow children throughout the course of their life. So, for myself, bringing a smart speaker in my house as an adult user, there's a different set of concerns, because the human voice undergoes a process of changeability in one's development. So we think of things like events like puberty, right, where my voice starts to sound different, or a different speech development milestones. Is a child hitting those milestones, and can technology monitor the arrival at those milestones, or the failure to arrive at those milestones on time? Or do things like a learning disability impede a child's progress on those pathways? The potential for technology to monitor that development is quite problematic, right? But again, other things like other social political variables like gender are also a very intensified concern for children. When we think about questions of like gender transitioning being something that coincides with maturity, and children kind of being given the opportunity to experiment or to adapt to their gender preferences and how they would like to perform their vocal identity and situate themselves in the world. So these kinds of things, as technology has a potential to monitor over one's life history, are of big concern. So at this point, underneath this image on the left, the Google Read Along platform, I've just taken kind of a quick screen grab of the privacy policy for Google. They write, both the signed in and signed out services of Read Along collect voice data. The voice data is processed only on user's device and is not shared with Google to protect users' privacy. A voice data is not shared at all after processing. So that sounds quite comforting. So clearly, Google is quite aware of the implications of the sensitivity of children's digital rights and privacy. And at this point, I think these kind of like child-specific applications for ease mining technology, they are bearing that in mind. There's this need to really position themselves on this issue without kind of potentially harming the domestication process, right? These developers want these applications to succeed. They want them to be normalized in schoolrooms, at home, and in other situations. But we can't take this for granted. There's oversight that's needed. As I've outlined before, these end user agreements, they're always changing. There's always a new justification that these companies introduce to kind of infringe upon privacy norms. So we can't take this for granted. I think we need to maintain this questioning, inquisitive attitude, especially around these child-based applications for the technology. So that's it for my talk. I'll just kind of point to, if you're interested in learning more about this, 3 things you might look into further reading. This first screenshot is a public commentary piece that I co-authored with Natalie Coulter, which kind of outlines this area of concern around eaves mining, always listening technology, and children's digital rights. This book in the middle is an excellent read that I'd recommend that looks at always listening technology in the marketing industry by Joseph Turow. And if you want to dive more into domestication theory, this third book cover is a forthcoming book. It's an edited collection by Maren Hartman on domestication. And I have a chapter in that book on virtual assistants. But this is kind of the most recent effort to kind of expand and update domestication theory for contemporary concerns and contemporary media technology. So that should be available I expect at the UBC library later this year.